Shalom, everyone. Today, January 13th, 2025, Parshat Shmot. We are doing Parshat Shmot. I want to focus on the burning bush scene. I'm not sure we've done that in the past. I know, of course, I've made reference to it in the past. Um, this is uh, the the approach that I wanted to make is approach in which everything becomes a question. Okay, I love the idea that we think we know this. You've heard me say this many times, and we really, for all the arrogance that we have, arrogance is too strong a word. The self assuredness in terms of our knowledge of the Torah, because we read it every year, we read it so often. You know, if we just employ one different strategy in reading it, we see how many questions we have. I'll just give you an example. When you pause, and I'll show this to you in the text. When you pause in each verse, um, and you kind of just you stretch it out like you're putting it under a magnifying glass. All of a sudden, you see the gaps in the text and all the things that raise questions. It's almost like a strategy that I sometimes use in reading or in praying and davening. You know, uh, try this on your own. You can try this. It's not harmful. But even say next time you're in shul or next time you recite the Shema, and I've mentioned this here before. It's put your name in the verse every with every word with every word or with every two words. So I'll use my first name, Shema Elliot, Adonai Eloheinu Elliot, Adonai Echad Elliot, and all of a sudden, when you put your name in the verse, um, it changes the whole way you experience it. I find a technique like that to be fascinating in terms of just a strategy for reading, for praying, for meditation, for experiencing text, um, and and I recommend it. It's not that I've gained insight, that shareable insight in the sense, when you recite the Shema, but all of a sudden, when you do that Shema, you know, Elliot, you're in the text. You're there. So when you read a story that we're going to read now, you're not necessarily don't have to put yourself in there, although why not? Um, but you can put your questions in there, and there's only one dominant question, which is why, 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 why is this going on? Why is this happening? Why is this doing this? Okay, and so let's go right into it. I have a couple of because we're in a visual medium. I have some visual things queued up, but I'm going to save that for for a moment in the cloud if we need them. Okay, so let's go into the text. I hear one visual cue is going to come up because I put it in my word program, and I've been very interested in this particular artist, which is James Tissot. In fact, I happened to be in the city yesterday, and I wanted to go to the Jewish Museum to see. They did an exhibit of him years ago, but I wanted to see if any of his paintings were in the permanent exhibition. In the end, I didn't get to the Jewish Museum because I went to Temple Emmanuel, and you have a couple of weeks left to see a remarkable exhibit in Temple Emmanuel of Herzliana. This is the reason why I went to it is because I knew of this exhibit, and also because one of the main collector of Herzliana in the world uh, is he's the owner of the largest collection of Herzliana, and his name is David Matlow, and he was a Rosh Hashanah at Camp Ramah in Canada, we were Rosh Hashanah together, and I've been in touch with him from time to time. A few years ago, during COVID, when we had a bar mitzvah, Oren Goldman had his bar mitzvah and did a little study on Herzl. So I wrote to him, to David Matlow, and I said, I have a bar mitzvah who's studying Herzl, and he was so excited because the collection, etc. Anyway, if you have a chance to go to see this collection, it's absolutely fascinating. It's a small collection on the personality and iconography of Herzl. Now, that's a big aside. So here's a picture of Moses. Moses adores God. That's probably not a good title, but can't blame Tissot for the title. James Tissot, this artist who is painting at this time, and I have a little Wikipedia on him for a second also, and just to give you his dates here, because I've been making so many references to him over the last several weeks. It's been in my sheets, my Parasha sheets. James Tissot here. So his dates are 1836 to 1902. A French artist. You can look him up on Wikipedia yourself. But what was interesting is that he, from what I read, he spent the last years of his life working on paintings of the subject of Old Testament. Although he never completed the series, exhibit 80 of these paintings in Paris, engravings. And according to the digging that I've done on this artist, his paintings were just abandoned or whatever. They were picked up by one of the people involved in the seminary. Now I'm forgetting his name. Gave it to the Jewish Museum, and the Jewish Museum has a large collection of these. Okay, so here is the text. Okay, with a nice picture. Okay, Moshe haya ro'eh. Now I'm going to read it full, and then we'll go through it granularly. Okay, Moshe haya ro'eh etzon yitro chotno kohen Midyan. Moshe was shepherding the flock of Yitro, his father-in-law, priest of Midian. He led the flock behind the wilderness and came to the mountain of God at Horeb. And God's messenger was seen by him as the flame of a fire out of the midst of a bush. Vayar V'inei hasne bo'er ba'esh v'hasne einenu ukal. The bush is burning with fire, but the bush is not consumed. Vayomer Moshe, Moses said, Asurana, let me turn aside, Ver'eh, that I may see, et hamar'eh hagadol hazeh, this great sight. Madua, why? For what reason? Lo yivarasne. Vayar Adonai. God saw that he turned aside to see. So God called to him out of the midst of the bush. Vayomer, he said, Moshe, Moshe. Vayomer, he said to him, Hineni, here I am. Vayomer, Al tikrav halom, do not come near to hear. Shal na'alecha, put off your sandal. Me'al raglecha, from your foot. Ki hamakom asher ata omed alav admat kodeshu. Where the place on which you stand is holy ground. Vayomer, Anochi Eloi avicha, Eloi Avraham, Eloi Yitzchak, Eloi Yaakov. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Yaakov. Vayaster Moshe panav, ki yareh me'abit al Elohim. Moses concealed his face, for he was afraid to gaze upon God. Vayomer Adonai, Ra'o ra'iti et oni ami. I have seen the affliction of my people that is in Egypt. Ve'tzakatam shamati, their cry I've heard. Mipnei noksav ki yadati ki et machovav. In the face of their slave drivers, Indeed, I have known their sufferings. Va'ared la'atzilo miyad Mitzrayim. So I've come down to rescue it from the hand of Egypt, to bring it up from that land, to a land goodly and spacious, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanite, Hittite, Amorite, Perizzite, Hivite, and Jebusite. V'ata, so hear the cry of the children of Israel come to me, and have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians have oppressed them. So now, go, for I send you to Pharaoh. Bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Moshe said to God, Mi anochi, who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, Indeed I will be with you. Ki ayeh imach. And this is the sign for you that I myself have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will all serve God by this mountain. Moses said to God, Hineh, here, I will come to the children of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. But they will say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I will be, however I will be. Vayomer kol tomar livnei Yisrael ehyeh shlachani alechem. Thus shall you say to the children of Israel, Ehyeh has sent me to you. Vayomer od Elohim Moshe, and God said further to Moses, thus shall you say to the children of Israel, God, the God of your fathers, the God of Abram, the God of Isaac, the God of Yaakov, has sent me to you. That is my name for the ages. That is my title from generations. Zeh zichri l'dor. Go, gather the elders of Israel and say to them, God, the God of your fathers, be seen by me, God of Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I have taken account of you and what is being done to you in Egypt. I have declared I will bring you up from the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, Jebusite, the land flowing with milk and honey. They will hearken to your voice, and you will come, you and the elders of Egypt, to the king of Egypt, and Israel, to the king of Egypt, and say to them, God, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. So now, pray, let us go on a 3 days journey into the wilderness, and let us slaughter offerings to God. Va'ani yadati, but I know that the king of Egypt will not leave you go, not even under a strong hand. So I will send forth my hand, and I will strike Egypt with my wonders, which I will do in the midst. After that, he will set you free. And I will give this people favor in the eyes of Egypt. It will be that when you go, you shall not go empty-handed. Each woman shall ask of her neighbor and all the sojourners in her house objects of silver, objects of gold, usmalot, and clothing, and you shall put them on your sons and your daughters. So shall you strip Egypt. And it goes on, but even that already is such a big chunk of text to think about. Given that we're going to do such a granular analysis of it. As I read it, and of course, the whole joy of studying is that you experience things, as I mentioned at the beginning, anew when you read it again and try to read it again with fresh eyes, and that's what we try to do, both here and of course in shul and every time we read. So, in reading it slowly, what occurs to me is that this is a story that's very difficult to tell in the sense that it's not difficult to tell. It's like every story in the storytelling mode, if you were to tell it orally, it demands a certain kind of skill on the teller's part, and it demands a certain kind of patience and kind of attention on the listener's part. I'm a long time ago, I was very interested in this, the art of storytelling, and I still am from time to time. And I notice, and I'm always kind of reading stories to, in the sense of how are these told, and listening to stories and listening to the storytelling aspect of it. And the storytelling aspect of it here, I think, enhances the text of it. especially because I'm going to ruin it for everybody now. Especially because we have so much visual, and here we're in a visual medium. There's so much visual acquaintance with the story. Okay, so I it would be remiss of me not to show you the most important depiction of this, in what is, I guess, a cinematic. We can say, 60, 70 years after it was made, the Ten Commandments, it still holds up as a cinematic masterpiece. It is, it has its flaws, of course, but just for your own edification, here you go. Can you all hear?
I am here. Put off thy shoes.
I love
from
that.
off thy feet. For the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Lord, why do you not hear the cries of their children in the bondage of Egypt? I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. Therefore I will send thee, Moses, unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring my people out of Egypt. Who am I, Lord, that you should send me? How can I lead this people out of bondage? What words can I speak that they will heed? I will teach thee what thou wilt say.
Okay. Wow. Oh, stop.
Oh, their sorrows.
Okay. So that is classic moment. Bob, I got your text there, and it's hard to keep on. But okay. So, and I'll show that in a second. What's interesting, I mean, we could really do a whole seminar on how the movie kind of distorts the text, and the movie is itself a midrash on the text, and changes certain things in the text because the movie has its own depiction. Someone had a question or no? Okay. Just out of my own curiosity, I looked up the Prince of Egypt one, and I didn't get to preview it. So we're gonna look at it together for a second, not because I want to waste time here, but I'm pretty curious here. Nice that there's a sheep in the background. We'll talk about that. So this version, they put the text of the King James Version onto it in the bottom. But
Here I am. Take the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground.
understand. I am the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
You are born of my mother in heaven. You are our brother.
What do you want with me?
Sure, cartoon.
I have seen the oppression of my people in Egypt, and have heard their cry.
Stop it! Leave that man alone!
So I have come down to deliver them out of slavery, and bring them to a good land. A land flowing with milk and honey. And so unto Pharaoh I shall send you. Me? Who am I to lead these people? They'll never believe me. They won't even listen. I shall teach you what to say.
Let my people go!
But I was their enemy. I was the prince of Egypt, the son of the man who slaughtered their children. You've chosen the wrong messenger. How can I even speak to these people?
Who made man's power? Who made the deaf, the mute, the seeing, or the blind? Did not I? Now go!
Moses, I shall be with you when you go to the king of Egypt. But Pharaoh will not listen. So I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders. Take the staff in your hand, Moses. With it, you shall do my wonders. I shall be with you, Moses.
Okay. Uh, you know what? I don't want to spend too much time, taking that apart, except for the fact that a couple of just wow. Okay. There's so much, that is being superimposed on the text. You know, if you just compare the voices of God in the Ten Commandments to the voice of God in the Prince of Egypt, you get a whole politically, correct version of, it's a whole discussion, and very masculine voice of God in 1954, and very kind of, gentle but irrational God in 1996 or 8, whenever the Prince of Egypt is made. I got you, Nanette, and got Susie. Okay, so go ahead.
Me?
No, Susie first, and then Nanette.
Um, in 1998, so God is the Kol Mamadaka.
Yeah, interesting.
And in the Ten Commandments, he sounds like Darth Vader.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is the problem of a visual depiction. We are, and it's, you can see so how powerful the medium is, because it just kind of entrenches itself in our minds. So much to say about the fact that the movie does amazing things on one level. It does other things to the text. The cartoon, kind of dumbs it down a little bit because it's a cartoon, but you can't do it any other way and not let people interpret it. Susan and Annette, go ahead.
So, so hey, Rabbi, I appreciate this. I've seen the movie a million times. Um, and of course, I appreciate the art of the storytelling. But what I want to know is, am I incorrect or correct in thinking about that? I can't help thinking about why are the Jews slaves in Egypt? I mean, according to Etzheim, according to that little summary in the beginning, it says point blank, God controls it all. So if God's controlling it all, why did he let the people be slaves? Should I not be even thinking about that?
No, you can think about it. It's just not the subject of our class today. No, the why, there are slaves for all the cascade of reasons that necessitate a redemption. Okay, now we go back to when God first makes him an appearance to Abraham and says, "Yeah, your children, your grandchildren, they're going to be slaves." That's in the covenant of the pieces back in chapter 15 of Breshit. God promises this, and one of the lingering questions that me and my colleagues have been discussing the last couple of weeks is, you know, it on the one hand it seems unfair that this is all built into the plan, uh, and so what we have is a very strong idea, the idea that God is a redeeming God, that God so that in proving and in demonstrating to the world or to the people what God is, it was as important, perhaps even more important, to to demonstrate that God is the God of human freedom, uh, and that we would make a covenant with a God that wants to free people, not only a covenant with a God that is the creator and master of the universe. Because you could say that the God creator of the universe, you know, is awesome and powerful, but not quite interested in human suffering. But here, in order to show that, we have human beings suffering, and they are redeemed. Go ahead, Alana. Yeah.
I can't help thinking that it seems like God is using the children of Israel through slavery and through redemption to show off his power.
So it's a great observation. Does God really need to show off his power, though?
Because maybe they don't know about it enough and they have to learn, but not such a way of teaching.
So, I mean, it is certainly part of this story. It's certainly part of this first story where God says, "I will demonstrate to Egypt my power. I'm going to show, so that they will believe in me." But is that necessary in the end? And the argument is, possibly yes. They need to be moved to power, because by God's power, in order to see God's compassion, in order to see God as the issuer of the law, and of course the partner in the covenant. It's more than just one dimension. Marlene, go ahead.
Timing wise, this would appear to be a covenant with Moshe, not a covenant with the people.
And so the question is, do you think that what God is doing here at the Sneh is for Moshe, or for what would a covenant with Moshe mean? I don't
But,
understand.
he's going to be the spokesman. True. He has to convince them that he really saw God and they should believe him, because up until now, he was not the leader. They were slaves and he wasn't their spokesperson. And he said that in the cartoon that he was right. But the covenant isn't with the people yet. The covenant isn't with the people until maybe you could say the Aseret HaDibrot.
Sure, right. So God has a strategy here, okay? The strategy is, okay, the people are enslaved, the people are suffering, as we correctly pointed out in the net, and the people need to be redeemed. So what do? Snap your fingers and redeem them? You have to redeem them through human agency. There needs to be a movement. There needs to be, there's there's power here of a human sovereign, and that's lethal power, and there's persuasion, and there's the demonstration, and there's the it's not a subtext. There's a definite supertext. Part
Rabbi,
of yes.
did the people have a relationship with God before this? When they were in Canaan starving, did they believe in God then, or was it the few people who were doing the action that we know?
Well, who are we talking about? We're talking about the sons of Joseph, sons of Jacob, who go down to Egypt. Do we don't know much about their religious lives. That is a big enigma. In except we do know one thing that Joseph keeps saying over and over in the
God sent me. God
God
sent me.
sent me. God. So there is the belief that there is providence, that is to say, things are happening for a reason beyond us, and this is God's reason. And that's also Jacob. Jacob's, has a vision of this. What we don't know is, and what we assume based on the text, is that Jacob conveys to his sons, and Joseph conveys. It does say this in the text. Joseph says it's because of God that Jacob conveyed all of this. And so what we don't know is whether or not that gets conveyed. But, of course we have oral tradition, and the oral tradition, of course, affirms that they live with this as a distinct culture in Egypt. Their distinct linguistic culture, a distinct, family culture, and a distinct culture of stories and memories that they have encoded and transmitted to themselves as they became a great, numerous people. We didn't study the first two chapters of the book of Exodus, but the first two chapters tell us, what transpires. What transpires is that they paru v'yishutzu v'yirbu v'yatzmu b'mod me'od. They become a huge people. How are they maintained as a people? What maintains them? This is a great question. We don't really have the answer to that, other than what the Midrash tells us, that they kept their culture. What was their culture? We don't know. How did they observe Shabbat? Did they observe Shabbat? Did they? We don't know. Of course not. But somehow they are distinct in the land of Egypt, and that distinctiveness applies in such a way such that Pharaoh can make them actually extinct. Pharaoh wants to enslave them and enacts these genocidal policies whereby all the male children are destroyed and killed, whereas the females are preserved. That's a genocidal strategy. We'll keep all of the women so that we can reproduce ourselves through them, and we'll eliminate all the men so that there'll be no men for them to reproduce with. Bob, go ahead.
I just wondered if this might connect up to the discussion you and your colleagues have been having on Parsha Talk about the transformation of someone's personality and change that Moses is having in the dialogue. I'm assuming he's not having a psychedelic trip out there with the burning bush.
Why assume that? No,
well,
we can look at it in that perspective, that through each and I was kind of going to go there in terms of asking the question, why is God saying this? What's happening here? And we'll get to that in a second. There is a development going on here. I think it's very different from the way that both Cecil B. DeMille and the Prince of Egypt depicted it. And this is it's interesting to present the text in contrast to its popular interpretation. Susie, and then we'll go back to the text. Go.
The late Professor Shalom Paul once said that by killing all the male children, Pharaoh wanted to create a people of all women, and that they would thus be a laughing stock because there were no men of the.
That's interesting. I respect Professor Paul a lot. It's a great interpretation. Um, it just, I in a way, I'd love to have like I'd love to be in the class and ask him that question, but in light of we're experiencing, we have two wars going on in the world, in Ukraine and in Israel and Gaza, and where sexual crime is part of war, and of course, the other wars that are raging in the world where sexual crimes are part of it. It's hard for an observer like me, to read these texts outside of that context and say these are deliberate acts of cruelty. I mean, murdering babies. Let's acknowledge that there's that's just cruel beyond cruel. And then, of course, what it does is it makes all the women in the people over the course of time, 10, 20 years, completely vulnerable to predation by Egyptian men. And it could only, so on the one hand, yeah, he's right. It's a nation of women, but they wouldn't be a nation. They would just be, taken as sex slaves and as breeders for Egyptians. To me, that it's a much more cynical reason than I think. Professor Paul was being charitable there. Okay, let's go into the text and see what's going on here. We'll go back. All right. So here's our Moses. This is James Tissot. Moses was shepherding the flock of Yitro. So also, we know, of course, we've already had Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov shepherds. Joseph is a kind of non-shepherd shepherd. The brothers definitely are shepherds. When the brothers go down to Egypt and Joseph says to them, when Pharaoh asks you, what are you? Don't tell him you're shepherds. So, but shepherds it's not only a profession, but it's a symbolic profession. It's independence. A shepherd is opposed to a farmer. The farmer is a person that adheres to structures and to power, and creates at the with the agency of the quote state for irrigation and for all sorts of massive projects, and the shepherd is independent. So we know that he's in Midian now. I did not present to you how he got to Midian. We know that he's married to the priest of Midian's daughter, Zipporah. He's got this flock into the wilderness. He came to the mountain of God to Horev. So now, an interpretive question is: I'm talking to the storyteller. I want the narrator in front of me, and I'm going like, so, Mr. Narrator, does Moses know that he's going to the mountain of God? Or are you telling me that he went to the mountain of God and discovered that that's the mountain of God by accident? Or are you telling me in terms of the larger context that this is the mountain of God and that they're going to end up there because you already know the end of the story that they're going to end up in the mountain of God, okay? So I have these interpretive questions already when the narrator tells me, Har Elohim. I say, I'm familiar with that because I'm an observant Jew, and I observe, the idea that God meets the people at the mountain of God. Susie, you have a question, or yeah? Unmute. Unmute yourself. Susie, unmute.
There's a beautiful Ladino song, La Consagración de Moises, the consecration of Moses. And it has him running away from Parasha, and the whole thing rhymes. It's magnificent. But there's two different versions of one of the verses, and in one version he's going to the mountain because he's looking for God,
okay,
or hoping to meet God, something like that. And in the other version, I think he's just there with his sheep. I don't remember exactly.
Okay, so good. So let's hold on to that, and you can close because you're getting static from your microphone. So we again, with the strategy of reading, you could say, okay, Vayinhaget atzon achar midbar. Why is he going there? Why is he taking them to the wilderness? Now, midbar, we have this idea that midbar is defined as an arid landscape, but midbar doesn't actually mean that. Midbar is just a grazing land. Okay, so he's going beyond the grazing land, achar hamidbar. Okay, which is, again, it's telling you that he's going into, we'll use a fancy word, a liminal place. He's going beyond a boundary of things where there is vegetation, and so something is driving him there, and we could compose all sorts of interpretations as to what is it. Here is this man. He is married. He has left his the world that he has known. He is a refuge because he has committed an act of manslaughter. He's in exile, and he has really, is this the rest of his life? Is he going to live with his father-in-law for the rest of his life tending sheep? And so he may be looking for something, as you correctly say, Susie. Go ahead, Lana.
Maybe he heard from his grandparents about God, and he went looking for him.
So it's as good a speculation as any, which could be that here he's reached his midlife and he's looking for meaning, or he's wondering, given the fact that
because of the situation of the children of Israel, he wanted to do something about it.
So maybe that's also possible.
A shepherd is a leader.
Right. And part of what happened, of course, I picked the story out of context, but part of what's going on in the early stories is identity. Who is he? And it's very easy to superimpose on a story like this the answer to the question as to why he's going. He's why do you go to the wilderness, to the edge of the wilderness? You go because you're looking for something.
Quiet.
And you're also looking for yourself. You're also trying to figure out what you're doing here. Okay, and you're a shepherd, and what the Torah doesn't tell us is what we assume is that there's tremendous self-awareness in Moses. Look, he's committed this manslaughter on the Egyptian because of his aroused sense of justice. He has another episode at the well, which is an aroused sense of justice and fairness. Okay, and he knows this about himself, and he knows that he's now part of an establishment in the family of the priesthood of Midian, but that's not who he is. He cannot. He knows he cannot live his life out as just the son-in-law. Okay, because it's not. It's even though Yitro, I think, demonstrates sufficient piety in terms of, as a Gentile who is in his own way God-fearing and righteous, but not covenanted. There is this phenomenon in the Bible of people who have great moral awareness and great fear of God, and perhaps even a knowledge of one God, but they're not covenanted. And Moses has to hold in his mind his lineage, his ancestry, his family. Bob, go ahead.
Sorry,
Yolanda, go ahead.
One more sentence. The symbol of fire is very meaningful. Why did God appear in a fire? Because fire can warm you up and make you feel good, but it can also burn you.
And so that is a very powerful. I mean, it goes to the whole notion of what he sees in the fire, and the vision that is experiencing here is a vision of paradox. The God as God that can comfort and is so necessary for human survival, and that God can be terrifying and destructive. Go ahead, Bob.
Question, Rabbi. How does a place become a liminal or sacred space for an individual or people?
I don't know other than, it's like I'm so used to geography, okay? So it's part of our own kind of experience of the world, where and we all live in basically an urban setting where you would have to go quite a distance, I think, to step outside of the urban setting to a rural setting. Um, in antiquity, these, of course, these were not as defined. Um, I grew up in a place where literally, if you drove on a highway 5 minutes out of the urban area, you'd be in wilderness. Okay, and of course, many of us, who grew up in landscapes where you were quite removed from other populations, know the boundary between populated areas and wilderness. Um, and if you are a shepherd, you are also aware of what is grazing, where you can graze your animals and where you can't. And I think that that's hovering here in the text, which is there is a point where, for whatever reason, because of the ground, because of patterns of precipitation, you name it, that he's going to the edge, and it says vayachar hamidbar, which is something that we don't really focus on, but to me, everything that conjures a boundary, I think, is significant. We've seen that countless times in Rishit where the character moves across a boundary, and here it's not a tributary water boundary, it's a land boundary. Okay, and that may have its own significance. Choreva comes to the mountain of God. Now, the mountain of God, interesting part of this geography is that there there is water there, okay, but it's water streams that run from the mountain. The reason why we know that there's water is because Moses, when in the golden calf episode, will take the dust of the calf and put it in water from the mountain. Okay, so but that's not what he's doing here. He is. I asked the question: does he know this is a mountain of God? What would a mountain of God be? We don't know. The narrator just threw that out for us. All right, let me go to the next question, the next verse, in the granular way that we're doing this. Vayera malach Adonai elav. So here, this is the Everett Fox translation. He says, God's messenger was seen by him. Vayera was seen by him. So it's the kind of passive voice. Susie, what's the proper grammatical term here? It's a nifal. It's a nifal. Okay, so the malach was seen by him as the flame of a fire. We mentioned that before, Alana. Out of the midst of the bush, he saw. Now here, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. So what does he see? He sees a malach. Okay, so in our imagination, as it's been constructed by visual cues through movies and art, we see a kind of picture of a winged creature. I don't know what we're going to say. I'm not sure that that's what we need to think of as a malach. He sees something. He sees something that is something that he can identify. Okay, so wait. So he sees in the flame. Vayera el malach Adonai alav bilabat esh. It's in the flame. Mitoch hasneh, out of the midst of a bush, and he saw. Behold, this is a storytelling word. V'hineh hasneh boer ba'esh. This is where storytelling is. 3-word phrases. Hasne boer ba'esh. Repetition of the word sne. And the word sne is going to repeat. It's sne. The 3 times here. It's 5 times in this whole passage. So, ukal means echol.
But not all of it.
But it's also completely destroyed. Look.
Eaten, but
absolutely, but look. If you look at the pictures of God, help the people of Los Angeles. Look at those devastated, destroyed communities. You say Pasadena, Ukal. It's been completely consumed by fire, completely desolate. Okay, so here, it's how long do you have to look at something before you realize that something's strange here? Okay, so he sees an angel, he sees the malach, he sees the bush, and he sees the fire, and he sees. So time is transpiring here. Does he respond to this moment? No. Okay. Next. Moshe says, sorry, he's Vayomer Moshe, Asura na ve'et hamar'eh hagadol hazeh, madua lo yivar asneh. So now the narrator is telling me that Moses is talking. So Moses is talking to himself. Asura na ve'et hamar'eh hagadol hazeh, madua lo yivar asneh. So I'm reading this very carefully. He's saying, let me turn aside that I may see this great sight. Madua lo yivarasneh is maybe Moses talking to himself. Let me see why the bush is not burning. Or maybe it's the narrator turning to the audience saying, Elliot, Madua lo yivarasneh. I love the strategy of reading, which is just take a moment and just do a little switch here. And don't assume you know everything here. Don't assume that you've been reading it 100 times and that this is exactly what happened in the 100th time. Maybe it's the question to us. And we have to ask, Madua lo yivarasneh. Why is the bush not being consumed? Okay? And that goes to the symbolism of the fire, the all-consuming fire that leaves things intact, which is what God is. God is the most powerful power of power, but that God can be contained in a human being. That is to say, not God contained in human. God can communicate to humanity, and the humanity can still be intact. That's my message here. That's a little. Oh, I get it. This is all Judaism right here. It means, the word of God is breaking through to human beings and is so powerful, and yet we're not being destroyed by it. We can contain it. It's like saying we have, I'll use this analogy which I've used before, we have the ability to create such immense energy out of fusion of atoms, if we only know how to do that, efficiently. But if we did it, it could explode us and destroy us. But if we controlled it, we could power cities with it. See what I'm saying? So he says, now this is the question I haven't really asked ever, which is, Vayar Adonai kisar lirot. God saw that he turned aside to see. Vayikra elav Elohim mitoch hasneh. Moshe, Moshe, Vayomer Hineni. We'll stop there. I'm going to put so God sees that Moses went to see the bush, or to see whatever the vegetation was, okay? So now, what that says to me is, Moses could have had any number of responses to the fire. At this point, the fact that Moses said, Asura na, I want to go into it, is different from another reaction, which is, I want to go away from it. I want to leave it. I want to retreat from it. And that God sees kisar lirot. So then I put the big pause. I'm going to, illustrate it by doing this here, okay? And by making a real pause here, between these two, say, Vayar Adonai kisar lirot. And I'm going to ask, so what is God, as it were, thinking here? Interesting. He wants to see. Is this the moment? Is this the moment? Is this the moment? And so God, there is a sense, if I were to kind of, help characterize the scene here, God wants so much to break through to human beings and wants so much the right moment. And the right moment here, and this gives us a tremendous sense of warmth and good feeling. The God's moment of breaking through to a human being is curiosity. I love this. This is such a great way to understand this text. And it's so true in human life. Okay? When is revelation? In the quote unquote, when do you feel a sense of discovery? Because a human being has curiosity. Human being has that inkling to see more, right? And to be human is to want to see, run towards and not run away, okay? Even though naturally, a natural reaction of any creature would be to run away, but he's saying, this human being is running toward. Vaikra. So I'll write my sheet about this week. So there's the idea, this is about human beings being curious, and that this insatiable power, drive to want to know, and the drive to know is met with a response from that object that he wants to know. And what is the response? And it's however you intone this, okay? And this is why the two clips were really, helpful in terms of creating a kind of spectrum. Moshe, right? Or Moshe, right? Is it the masculine domineering God, or is it the feminine, sweet kind of, whispering, okay? However you want to hear those words, it's up, it's how you hear those words. In the end, as I say, if we are to make ourselves inside this text and listen to it and be inside and say, Vayomer Elliot, Moshe, how do you hear this? What's the intonation? What's the music of the words here? Okay? And it's how is Moses responding here? And that's where our art comes. That's where our interpretation comes. Marlene, go ahead.
Perhaps he was so blinded by the flame that he had to turn aside so that he could see where he really was. And because it says he turned aside.
Sar lirot. So I don't want to be picky on on Everett Fox in the translation. So sar is to turn aside, but is it turning aside towards or turning aside away? Vayar Adonai kisar lirot. Turn aside to see. It's almost an oxymoron. The way I'm reading it this time, and of course, call me next year and we'll read it another way, okay? But here's what I'm saying, and maybe I'll close the screen here so I can see everybody, which is, he's got a flock. Where's the flock? The cartoon did it nicely because you heard in the background a little bit of braying, okay? And he's got to, and this is where I would kind of, he's got to leave the sheep for a minute in order to be in the presence of God, okay? And this is the human struggle of, I guess, the man of God, the leader, right? At what point does the leader have to, pull away from the sheep? And what point does the leader have to be present with God? Just trying to remember which person. Oh, Herzl, of course. Yesterday in the exhibit. Okay, it occurs to me because Herzl, as a mercurial figure as he was, and I don't think we 120 something years, 30 years after, can appreciate the meteoric nature of that personality that just kind of, galvanized the Jewish world. Who paid a huge price for it in the fact that his wife was nuts. He had 3 children, one who was a drug addict, one. I mean, it's a tragedy beyond tragedy beyond tragedy. And what was the story? The story was he was devoted singularly to the fate of the Jewish people, and he paid a huge price personally because his family was consumed with all sorts of things, including what we will probably call now depression, mental illness, and every manifestation of it. I know that there are people here that have dipped into that biography, and so you can see here that the tension exists in this moment. I'm reading Moses has to, and what Marlene you picked up on, which is kisar lirot. It's sar min hatzon lirot. He has to leave the sheep in order. So the sheep are there now. Sheep can last fairly well by themselves for I don't know, a couple hours, 3 hours. They'll be fine. Okay, you don't need to be on top of them all the time. Okay, but you do need to herd them back at some point. So he goes off, and that's where he gets to be with God. Okay, and it's when he's with God, and we'll just do one more verse as we kind of conclude here. So God calls him, Moshe, Moshe, here I am. Do not stand here. Put off your sandal from your foot, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. There's all sorts of interpretations of this that we could go into. Okay, and then I am the God of your father. I love this line, Vayaster Moshe panav, ki yareh me'abit el Elohim. It's now, here, Marlene and everyone. This is the moment where after God has identified himself to Moses, that's when he turns his face, Vayaster Moshe. And I cannot help to read this with both the curiosity and almost the sense of foreboding of that moment, because he is the first. He is saying, I am hiding. Vayaster Moshe panav. At the end of the Torah, God threatens Israel by saying, I threaten to hide my face from you. So Moshe wants to be hidden, and God is really not going to let him be hidden. But at the end of the Torah, God says, I threaten to be hidden, and we don't want God to hide from us. And I think that I'm not saying that that's the main, set of themes in the Torah, but here it's already kind of, placed right in front of us. God says, I've seen, I've heard, I said, I know, all right? And then we'll just do the response, which is Moshe said, who am I that I should go? And the movie and both they did it, very interesting interpretation on that. And then God enigmatically says, Vayomer ki ehyeh, I will be with you. And then God says, Moses says, I'm going to go to them, and they're going to say, who sent me? Vayomer Elohim Moshe ehyeh asher ehyeh, the most enigmatic phrase in the Torah, I will be what I will be. That's who I am. I always think that should be interpreted, ehyeh imcha, asher ehyeh imcha, I will be with you as I will be with you. To me, reading it that way gives a tremendous amount of comfort, which is the sense that the whole essence of the religious experience is to be with God, ehyeh asher ehyeh, not abstraction, not something that you can't even discern, but it's connection. So then there's the next verse, Vayomer kol tamar livnei Yisrael ehyeh shlachani alechem. And here again, I want to stop the narrator and say, wait a minute. God just said, ehyeh asher ehyeh, I will be with you as I will be with you. I get that. Thank you. But who is saying this? Vayomer kol tomar livnei Yisrael ehyeh shlachani alechem. Is God saying this to Moses? Thus shall you say to the children of Israel, ehyeh shlachani alechem? Or is Moses repeating this and saying it with a question? So here, it's a very complicated reading here, but it's saying, Elohim el Moshe, ehyeh asher ehyeh, I will be what I will be, ehyeh asher ehyeh, imcha asher ehyeh imcha, I will be with you, I'll be with you. And so Moses says, here I would like to be a little comedian, okay, and go, what? What are you telling me? Are you telling me, yeah, sheimche, yeah, lachani? Is that what you're telling me? Look back at the text again. My reading here, Koto, are you saying, Vayomer, Moses said, I'm saying Moses, not God, Koto mar livnei Yisrael, yesh lachani alechem? Question mark. Are you saying to me that I should just say, yeah? Are they going to get it? Vayomer od Elohim Moshe. So God then says to Moses, Ko Tomar, this is what you should say. Adonai Elohim Avotechem, Elohim Avraham Yitzchak. They'll get it when you say this. They'll get Abraham, they'll get Isaac, they'll get Yaakov. Ze Shmi Leolam, Ze Zichri Ledor Vador. That's my name. That's who sent you. This is what you should say. They'll get it, okay? You, yeah, sure, yeah. I'll be with you. I'll be with you. But tell them that it's the God of your ancestors. Okay? So back, Marlene, you made a good point at the beginning, which is this private to Moses? It has to be. Of course it has to be. Because God has a job to do, which is to enlist Moses as the leader. And Moses, as we see, of course, in this moment and elsewhere, is reluctant, as most leaders are, but gets convinced to do this. And gets convinced, I think, because he knows that God will be with him. In fact, I find that to be, the most powerful theme, because the moment that God threatens not to be with them, after the golden calf and elsewhere, that's when Moses basically, says to God, I'm not going to do it without you. You promised me you'll be with me, and if you're not going to be with us, I'm not going. And so that becomes the main theme. So you see here, in this, I mean, we did maybe 8 verses here. There's just, it's not that there's so much there. It's that, again, we're so used to reading it and so reading it, carefully without listening to music, listening to, what's happening and all the different questions that emerge from here. And understanding, that there's God trying to break through and a human being trying to react to that, and that's where the story emerges. Go ahead, Marlene.
On introspection, when Moshe has left the palace, he's now trying to figure out who he is, and he's walking along with his sheep and just daydreaming about what he could be, and so then his interaction with God is a more prescient thought than just a chance encounter.
Yes. Moses is primed for this. It's, again, I want to interview the narrator and say, why at this time? Why have it now? What's going on here? Tell me, I'm missing 99% of the story. You didn't tell me, you don't tell me what's going on in Moses' mind. You don't tell me what's Moses bringing from his background, from his, experiences from Egypt and his prescience, etc. Right. And so, I'm going to be inside the narrator's mind here and say, all of that's there. Of course it is. Yes.
How much of what his forefathers went through and the burial and the blessings, how much of that does he know?
We don't know. But, again, what we're going to present to this is present, an assumption that something is transmitted. They know who they are, and they know that God spoke to their ancestors. They know that they had an ancestor. They know that there's a Joseph in the past. They have an ancestral story, like we all do. I mean, we who live, in the post-immigration era after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, we have shards of ancestral stories, okay? But we all have stories of our ancestors somewhere. We don't go back that far. We go back, at the very most, I think we have 3 or 4 generations. I barely know my great-grandparents' story. I certainly don't know my great-great-grandparents' story. Go ahead, Bob.
I have to say, I don't have a sense of foreboding at all. In fact, my sense here is that whatever uncertainties or fears that Moshe has, he's actually being reassured. And one
Okay.
of the readings I had was that the snare was also supposed to represent the Jewish people going into the future, that it will never be consumed completely either by
Nice.
whatever goes on around us.
Sure.
There's a comment also that I heard that Miriam, who also challenged when Amram would not have sexual relations further, that was another form of bringing hope when things look lost and
Sure.
terrible.
Sure.
So there's a threading of different things it seems going on.
No question. It's so interesting, the layers and layers of Jewish interpretive tradition have obviously brought out from these scenes this message for reasons that are, to me as a rabbi preacher, obvious. We all have our congregations. We all have to keep people alive and keep them hopeful. And I'm thanking you for giving us that reminder, because it just enables us to conclude on at, at least the word hope and the theme of hope as we make it here. Okay?
But
Yes, go ahead.
Rabbi, how would you react if you were Moshe to
Yeah.
such a mission? And what would you say?
But yeah, very so I gotta put myself in the story and go like, so I can identify with the curiosity. Um, I probably am more creaturely though, and don't have, I would probably say, I'm not sure I want to, it is a fearful sight. Um, and we all like to reassure ourselves that we are courageous people, but we are, in the end, both risk averse too, and not willing to subject ourselves to too much danger, and I do wonder, there's a reason why I'm not Moses, okay, and we have to
But
recognize,
he could have refused totally.
and he could have.
Maybe in a way, he wanted to do it.
So that this goes to what will become a theme throughout the book, which is, Moses as the extraordinary character that he is, and we have to recognize that as much as we want to project into Moses and see ourselves, in the mirror, that there's something to be said for an extraordinary character. I think, again, one of our modern issues is that we're so quote unquote egalitarian, and that we want to see in everybody, equal characteristics and talents. We tend to forget that there are some people that are just extraordinary in terms of ability, talent, ingenuity, brilliance, genius, etc. And that they really stand out because of those remarkable talents. We like to think that religion should not, and access to God should not be determinant on human ability, but that's never been true. That is to say, there are just some people that are exceptional in that they're so finely attuned to a frequency that most of us are not. The same way that there are exceptional athletes, and there are exceptional musicians, and there are exceptional composers, and exceptional
Politicians.
there are people that are just endowed with such unique capabilities and characteristics and talents that they excel. And here is Moses, who, admittedly we see as also flawed, but what's exceptional here is that he runs towards and not away, and I think that that's a good point. Okay, well, speaking of running away, we'll conclude there. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much for being here, and see you next week. Take care.